Now, here's the story of Gecko Moria. Gecko Moria, Gecko Moria was one of the seven warlords of the sea, or was, you know, and even like Crocodile lost his title. And it was before the warlord system was abolished. Um, so, story of Gecko Moria starts, similar to Crocodile, right? He lived his life, and then during his execution, he was like, damn, I want to go after the One Piece too. Somewhere along the way, he fights a guy named Kaido, a beast named Kaido. And, it wasn't no close match now, y'all. He got his ass whooped to a degree. And, like, he thought he had a chance. See, Crocodile fought against Whitebeard. This didn't happen at the same time, guys. On different occasions, different spots. But Gecko Moria thought he could fight against Kaido, King of the Beasts. He was the youngest of the Rocks pirates, and he thought he could handle him. But nope, he got sent packing and shit. So then he had to, um, and it wasn't clear if he had a devil fruit or not at that point or not. But he lost, and eventually, he did find, you know, corpses and other things, and he became one of the seven warlords of the sea as well. Probably because of his fight with Kaido and also his devil fruit power. They were aware of it. See, he could steal shadows and put them inside of corpses and then control them. He eventually got Ryuma's corpse, and he got other corpses too. And he was sailing around like the Florian Triangle, where it's like dark and gloomy. See, and he needed that so, his shadows could be cool. Another thing, well, people could survive. The people, you know, I don't know. Thriller Bark's a big ass island though. And now it's his, ship, Thriller Bark. And his goal was to create a shadow army shadow army big enough to go against Kaido. Cause, he was like, if I make an army big enough to go against Kaido or put, shadows inside of these dead ancient giants and other things, I can fight against Kaido and I won't lose like I did last time. And he had been planning this shit for years. You know, See, by the time Luffy gets to Thriller Bark, things took a turn. See, Gecko Moria had stole the Shadow of Brook and put it inside of Ryuma. Um, and that was one of his guys that was like, cool with the fucking, well, that's one of his cool zombies. One of the ones that's, actually like that. All the other ones were actually weak. They actually were weak as fuck. Oars was, the only other one that was, powerful. So Luffy got there, he got his shadow stolen. Everybody got their shadow stolen by Gecko Moria. Moria was playing games and he was like, I'll put Luffy's shadow inside of Oars because I want somebody, strong controlling, or somebody who is strong and powerful, their shadow taking control of Oars, and then him being the person that's like, hey, because he can control the shadow once it's in somebody, in a zombie. He's like, now you have to destroy these people and these people. And, the Straw Hats had to fight against Oars, and then eventually Moria himself. See, Moria took all the shadows in the island and he absorbed them all and became a big monster. It kind of like gave him an amplification, of strength, durability, and all that extra shit. But it wasn't enough. Luffy was able to handle that shit. See, I don't like Moria that much. I don't know anybody who's like, that's my nigga and shit. Moria is my, you know, that's who I like out of the Seven Warlords. I think he's like not loved, and for good reason. He's like, he just ain't like somebody that people want to be or emulate or anything like that. The idea behind his Delph fruit is cool to people, right? Like me too. I like the fact that he can take the shadow, put it in somebody else, and then that person who lost their shadow turns to dust when the sun comes up. That's powerful shit. But the way he uses his Delph fruit is pretty fucking weak. Because then um, and also before Straw Hat was disposed of him or knocked his ass out, right? Bartholomew Kuma came there and was like, "Yo, I can help you take these guys out. These guys are kind of, like that. Their captain's bounty is close to yours, you know, because Moria's is like 320 million, and then Luffy's is 300 million. And he's like, you could lose to Luffy, I'm here for backup. And he's like, no, I'll be all right. And he lost. And then they kept it a secret that Luffy beat Gecko Moria. See, Luffy's bounty actually would have been higher than that if they knew about that. But they kept it a secret, and Gecko Moria did get to keep his title, and he was at Marineford. But when he was at Marineford, he got his ass whooped by Jinbei. Jinbei put the wood on him. Yeah, Jinbei being another one of the seven warlords, and later a Straw Hat pirate too. But Gecko Moria lost his title there. They found out about it, you know. Doflamingo did him in. He's like, oh no, and he lost his crew and other things, and he didn't show up again until way the fuck later. Like, oh my god, this boy didn't show up until this bitch didn't show up until um the Reverie arc, which is like episode 900 something, and he was looking for Absalom, the remnants of his crew. Perona is a part of his crew. Perona got sent somewhere else by Kuma, but Gecko Moria was like, okay, I'm on Blackbeard's Island. I need my, you know, guy Absalom. He was kind of like his right hand man a little bit. He goes there, and Absalom is actually dead already. Katarina Devon killed him, and then Shiryu ate his Del fruit. And he was like, oh, fuck, he had the invisible fruit, but now you have it, so he's dead. He's like, oh, fuck, I'm basically screwed. And they grabbed him up, and nothing's known about Gecko Moria after that. I guess they want him for the Del Fruit to see if he wants to either, submit to Blackbeard and become a crew member or just die and they take his Del Fruit. But, he was, locked up. They got rid of him. He's not apparently anywhere. He's somewhere with the Blackbeard Pirates. They have him as a slave, chained up. But Gecko Moria is a character that, he don't, I ain't gonna love him more. He has what he has. He has this shadow fruit. His body, his physique went in decline. And this is why, maybe if Gecko Moria wasn't so fucking weak, what I mean by this is if he wasn't such a bitch eating food and other things, basically he like got his dough fruit, right? And he made the zombies do everything for him. And when that happened, he became lazy and fat and weak physically. So then he could use his devil fruit, but not to the best abilities. You know, Moria is just not one of those characters like that. The only warlord that he's beating is Buggy the Clown. I keep telling people that, that's the only one that can, he can defeat. Anybody else, he can't. He just wasn't like that. And that's what Doflamingo told him when he, told him he wasn't a warlord no more. You just ain't like us. He just ain't like us. But that's the story of Gecko Moria. Not a character that is, expanded on too much. Lures of fighting Kaido and other things, but taking into account that was back in the day. They were both weaker back then. Or, well, actually, Moria was, not weaker, but had some things going for him. He had a future, but now he kind of don't. But he does, I guess. I don't think he's dead. But who knows when we'll see Moria again. But that's the story of Gecko Moria. That's told by Darius the Green Angel. Stay cool, around the corner.